This is Fresh Tracks Weekly. Randy is in Washington, D.C. this week. He's meeting with various senators, representatives, and staffers to talk public land issues and get some insight into what's currently going on. So we're going to talk a bit about that, but also the newest method in which politicians are trying to sell public lands and some major decisions potentially being made in the next few weeks. We also have a few news stories from the week. In Washington State, the Department of Fish and Wildlife has banned the use of bait for big game hunting, along with implementing some new rules to try to combat chronic wasting disease within the state. The director of Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife approved the proposal put forth by the department, which will ban all feeding of deer, elk, and moose for both hunting and in general. Previously, baiting for the purpose of hunting was allowed if the quantity of bait was under 10 gallons and more than 200 yards from other bait sites. In addition to this ban, it will also be illegal to use scent lures that are derived from deer urine or glandular materials. It'll also change rules related to transporting deer, elk, and moose meat and parts into the state. These rules will also begin mandatory CWD testing for harvest and salvaged animals within any region that CWD has been detected, which for right now is just the eastern region. The reason for the rule changes are to help limit the spread of the disease by reducing the known vectors for transmitting, which include through feces, saliva, urine, or contaminated environments. So anything that concentrates wildlife more than normal worries managers, and having potentially infected animal parts spread into other areas has also been a known method for spreading the disease. The crazy thing about CWD prions is they cannot be killed by freezing or boiling. It can persist in animal tissue or on the ground for a really long time, which makes it extra challenging to slow the spread. There is still significant confusion and uncertainty for federal employees at multiple agencies, with back and forth between several courts and the Trump administration. But at least within the Department of Interior, more than 16,000 probationary employees that were fired have been sent reinstatement letters. A U.S. District Court ruled that the layoffs were illegal. The Trump administration appealed that decision, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals rejected it. So it looks like many of the Interior employees will be offered their jobs back with back pay. Dak Collins of Outdoor Life reported on this matter using examples from within the Fish Wildlife Service of the Sea Lamprey control program in the Great Lakes. Sea lampreys are invasive to the lakes and can wreak havoc on the system. In the 1950s and 60s, they were so abundant that they collapsed the fishery. Lampreys prey heavily on lake trout, lake whitefish, and ciscos, and they were a major reason for the extinction of several species of cisco. The Fish Wildlife Service is able to spray a chemical that kills them in their larval stage, along with constructing barriers and sterilizing adult lamprey. They have been able to reduce the lamprey population by 90 to 95%, proving to be a huge success story for the world's largest freshwater fishery. But it takes continued work and suppression of the lamprey to keep the system healthy. And this is a high priority, as it's been estimated that the economic value of the Great Lakes fisheries to be around $7 billion annually, supporting over 75,000 jobs. Anyway, that's why there was so much concern over this, because a significant portion of employees working on the control program were fired, but at least for now they will be allowed to return to work. In Montana, a bighorn sheep unit in the Missouri Breaks has been closed down to hunting after only a handful of sheep were counted in the spring survey. The Missouri River Breaks have become quite famous in the sheep world for producing massive rams and supporting healthy, growing sheep populations. While many areas throughout the West face significant challenges with pneumonia die-offs in their sheep herds, the Breaks seem to have this ability to weather the storms without having as many die-offs. It was always a little peculiar to managers, as many of the sheep that have been tested in the Breaks have for quite a while had the same pathogens that are known to be associated with the pneumonia die-offs, but they seemingly weren't as affected by it. But in the last couple of years, populations in the Breaks have been declining, especially within 622 hunting district, which was just shut down. Fish, Wildlife, and Parks has not made an announcement as to what the causes of the die-offs are, as they have not found a lot of dead sheep due to the remoteness of the terrain. But one ram did die during the survey, and a necropsy is being done on that individual. In New Mexico, a special county commissioners meeting is making headlines after Catron County locals and ranchers aired their grievances about Mexican gray wolves killing pets and livestock. Mexican wolves were reintroduced into the area in the late 1990s and have grown to a minimum of 286 individuals within an area of Arizona and New Mexico. There was at least 100 confirmed livestock kills in this area in 2024, although ranchers claim that that number is significantly higher. Public comment in the meeting also stated that wolves are increasingly less fearful of humans and have killed pets on their front doorsteps and are approaching humans more and more often. Concerns from hunters were also heard, stating that it has become harder to hunt and call elk due to the presence of the wolves. The meeting resulted in county commissioners unanimously voting to declare a state of emergency over the matter, requesting more resources and funding from the governor to help with adding protections and range riders to haze the wolves. In Wyoming, a grant has been frozen that could have provided conservation easements for up to 20,000 acres of private land in critical wildlife migration corridors for antelope, elk, mule deer, and moose. Conservation easements, of course, are agreements between two parties where a private landowner receives money in exchange for agreeing to leave their land undeveloped. They have been an incredible tool for conserving landscapes and allowing ranchers to keep their operations going and enable them to pass down their property without massive tax burdens. The Jackson Hole Land Trust had been awarded $21.25 million in funding for conservation easements, but the money has not yet been obligated, meaning that the money is stuck in limbo. Conservation easements in Wyoming generally have bipartisan support, and many people are optimistic that the funds hopefully will be released in the future. Another project that had funding frozen where the money had already been obligated was unfrozen, allowing the conservation easements to continue forward. So currently everything is on hold, but we will be continuing to watch this one to see how it shakes out. In Nevada, Governor Joe Lombardo recently announced that the state is entering an agreement with the federal government to identify Bureau of Land Management land that is available for affordable housing. A recent bill, AB 540, would also allocate $200 million in funding from the state's general fund, along with $50 million from other housing accounts for various loans related to land purchases and housing development. But the governor has made it clear that he hopes to use BLM land as part of the area to develop, saying, quote, "With 85% of our state under federal control, Nevada has struggled to find land to build more housing. However, since taking office, my administration has worked tirelessly to change this," end quote. All right, with that, we are jumping into our deeper dive where Randy is joining in remotely from Washington, D.C. to fill us in on what the heck is going on out there. Not in the office this week, you're in Washington, D.C.
I am sitting in a hotel room in Washington, D.C., Marcus.
And I feel like you got to kind of give us the lowdown of why you're there. You got to, what's going on?
Yeah, well, as you know, so much public land stuff has been going on in the last few months. A group of people put, they call it a fly-in. So I came in on Tuesday, I'll be here through Sunday. And you try to be strategic about where are the weak points, where are the supporters, what are the committees, the agencies, and for the last couple months, there are people here who have been trying to set up meetings for us who are here. And so you get here, you go meet with people who, you know, some of the discussions might not be, what would I say, everyone's in agreement. And then you have some meetings where some might say, well, why would you go meet with this person? They're already on your side. Well, you want to go there and give them support and thank them and let them know that, hey, if there's anything I can do, I'm on board. So, yeah, it's been interesting. They divvied it up geographically. So I'm from Montana. So obviously I meet with the Montana delegation. There's people here, Michigan, Pennsylvania, where else? Arkansas. And a bunch of other states. And part of that strategy is like Representative Bruce Westerman from Arkansas, fanatic hunter. He's one of the key elements over on the House side. So people might say, why would you have a person from Arkansas? There's only, a small amount of public land there. Well, this person has a relationship with Mr. Westerman. And so we're being strategic about it and trying to figure out from staffers who sit on these committees. Those are the people who really know a lot of what's going on in the committees. What's the scuttlebutt? What's really happening? What's not happening? How much is rumor and how much is truth? And over years and years of developing relationships, with that comes trust, where they'll maybe share with you some things that they think you should know.
Gotcha. Well, thanks for doing it. Thanks for being out there. But you sent me an article yesterday. While you're out there, there was some reporting that what we've been talking about the last month or 2 months, really, about different ways to sell, dispose, transfer federal land. The newest tactic, I guess, has been brought up of they're trying to do it in the budget reconciliation process, right? So, and you were trying to fill me in. Yeah, if you can explain, it sounds like it's going to require, in order for them to dispose of land that they're hoping to, help with the housing affordability, that they're going to use this process, which will allow them to. You were saying that it's going to allow less votes, or it's going to require less votes, right? Than the normal 60 of the Senate.
For people who may not understand where this 60 vote, 51 vote comes in the Senate, this is a really quick civics lesson. There's more to it than this, but this is the basics of what people need to know. In the Senate, the rule is to end debate on a bill and send it to vote requires 60 votes. Once the 60 say, all right, yeah, let's cast our votes, then it only takes 51, because there's 100 members in the Senate. With one exception. If each, like in the case of a budget bill, the House has its budget, the Senate has its budget, and then they have a reconciliation. So they've both kind of passed what they think their version of budgets are. Once you go to reconciliation, you do not then need the 60 votes again in the Senate. So all it takes then is 51 votes. So the way you get around the 60 vote limit, because they know they would never get 60 votes on some of these crazy public land deals, is let's make it part of the budget reconciliation process. Then it only is going to require 51 votes in the Senate. So yeah, that article I sent you, when I woke up yesterday morning, my phone was smoking. I was like, I better charge it again, as many text messages and stuff as I'm getting, because some of us got rumor probably 2 weeks ago that there was going to be a stunt to try use the budget reconciliation process to bury the sale of a big chunk of public land in there. And being the optimist, I'm like, no, they wouldn't do that. That's really going out on a limb. Well, I guess I should have paid more attention to what I was told a couple of weeks ago, because that's what was announced yesterday without any details. It was just an announcement that certain delegations, and I'll tell you who it is, it comes out of Utah, and it's not just that person, it's a group of people that are on board with the idea, has said that they want to use the budget reconciliation process for a disposal of a large chunk of public land for the purposes of lowering the cost of housing.
Well, and even in that article, there were some people quoted saying that they and to me it was implying more than just BLM land. It sounded like it'd be Forest Service land as well, and they were talking about things close to national parks was one of the quotes, and then just urban areas that are surrounded by public land, which is everywhere in the West, or not everywhere, but a lot of places in the West. And so it's I don't know, it's concerning. And then you heard some rumors too about the amount of land that they're hoping to do, right?
So this is where relationship with staffers. So you got staffers who work on the staff of, say, a senator or a congressman. Then you got staffers that you're talking to because they also work on certain committees. And so there's key committees in the House on public land, and there's key committees in the Senate that work on public land. So you try to build relationships there. There are also a bunch of people here who this is what they do. They live here, they lobby, they have multiple clients. And so some of those are people you get relationships with, and you start asking around, they're like, all right, they refused to publish any details yesterday. What are the details? And so the details are that has been asked, it's like a poorly kept secret here, that they want to identify 500,000 acres of U.S. Forest Service land to be sold by September 30th, 2026.
Which is insane, because some of that stuff we were talking about, like with the flip foot, like the small parcels, it's like, okay, there was 100 acres total that was sold that was pretty much surrounded by Las Vegas or whatever, but 500,000 acres is on a whole nother scale. It's insane.
That was strategically done. It could mess up so much access to so many places. Now, everybody who's saying this is a great idea, like Senator Sullivan in that article from Alaska, he said, I think this is a great idea. And so...
But then our own in Montana, Ryan Zinke and Steve Daines, they came out against it right off the bat, which that was super encouraging to see. And you talked with them too, right?
Yeah, and it was definitely the subject of the discussion, with the assurances of, that isn't, we're not gonna, we would do all we can to keep that from happening.
So it's not a full, there's not an absolute majority, or we don't know yet, I guess, really, but it's
right.
They don't have everybody on board with this, I guess, is the writing on the wall. But
yeah, so right now everyone's trying to keep this quiet or secret of what is the criteria that's going to be applied in identifying these lands. What lands will they be? Where will they be located? What's going to be the mechanism and process for how they'd be sold? So there's no details other than kind of the warning shot yesterday that, hey, we intend to use the budget reconciliation process for this. Now, I hope that as much energy as that created yesterday, these folks say, let's maybe rethink this strategy. But we touched on something a couple weeks ago of how Department of Interior, which the two agencies we're really concerned about in Department of Interior is the Bureau of Land Management and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Department of Interior has a bill called FLTFA, the Federal Land Transfer Facilitation Act, where I can't remember, this bill is almost 30 years old, I think. It said go and find inaccessible and unnecessary parcels, identify them in your land use plans or from your land use plans, and let's get them on this list. And if they meet all this criteria, we can sell them, it'll go into a pot and we'll replace them with that money. That's the general idea. Well, that bill only applied to the Department of Interior. So that's why it's been so hard to do anything on the Department of Ag, which is the parent agency for the U.S. Forest Service. So one of the goals, it sounds like, is folks want to have a mechanism, if you want to call it that, similar to FLTFA over on the U.S. Forest Service side. And the key thing to know there is in FLTFA, once something's identified and has went through the process, the agency itself can sell the land without having an act of Congress. On the Forest Service side, for much of a land exchange or a sale or anything, requires an actual act of Congress right now. So as a minimum, it sounds like what they want to get out of this process is a similar mechanism over on the Forest Service side. So that if you think about it, then you don't have to have a big argument here in D.C. about selling acreage if you can get it on the list.
And that was an interesting thing too, because we talked about the BLM example and how that process is already in place, right? What you just explained. And what I thought was interesting is after we recorded that, I was making the thumbnail for the video, and I went through the old auctions. So I went back to like some of the early auctions of that BLM land, and they have the township range section, so you can go right down to where it is. And then I went to the map to find where some of the housing was built to see how affordable it was. And the number of houses that were over $1 million was insane. The majority of them were over $1 million. And I found that one that I put in the thumbnail. It was $3.5 million for sale. That's built on this old BLM land for affordable housing. And so that's just like, I mean, we can hope that it's done in a better way, but it's just like, this is the example we have. History tends to repeat itself. Why would I think that it's going to be any different? Like, if we're actually talking about affordable housing, like, it just doesn't seem like this doesn't seem like the way. I don't think, and it's just like, and the lack of land is only one tiny part of the equation, right? There's so many other factors at play that are going to actually make housing affordable. And so to just, sell off our public land, we're never going to get it back. This isn't like, it's not something that we can try and then undo. This is a forever thing that you can't undo. And that's the frustrating part, I think, to a lot of us hunters,
Well, all of what you said there is correct, and it's known. We could use an example of, okay, let's use Bozeman, Montana. The average house sells for $900,000. Like, just as, an average house. We have no shortage of private land to develop in that part of Montana.
Yeah, you can expand all the way out the Gallatin Valley, or, up towards Three Forks, and there's all sorts of land. I mean, but it's just, anyway, yeah.
So there's so many examples that prove that it's not the supply of land that is driving this. It's land use planning. It's a whole bunch of other things. Anyhow, all those arguments are brought to the table here and are discussed. But it goes back to this ideological view that public lands are unconstitutional, or ideologically, I just don't support public lands. And so these groups feel that right now they have an opportunity to leverage their situation to start accomplishing some of that. And I think what we've told people all along is no one's ever going to show up someday and say, hey, tomorrow we're going to have a bill that sells all 640 million acres of U.S. federal land. That's not, anyone who thinks that's happening, that's not what we're talking about. It's not what we've been talking about. Every little crisis that they can find is going to be used and leveraged for an excuse to try dispose of public lands. And right now, you have...
You could make an analogy. Go ahead, sorry.
Right now, the crisis they want to use is affordable housing. The other whispers you hear is it's going to help pay off the debt. And it's kind of a weird... if you think about the analysis, they promise you over here that we're not selling any real important lands, but it's going to make a big difference in paying off the debt. Well, if they're not really important lands, they're not going to sell for crap. So how is that going to help pay off the debt? It's like, so the arguments don't make any sense, but they sound good in a 30-second soundbite standing in front of the news cameras for the folks back home that you're doing something.
Yeah, that's a good point about if you're going to actually try to tackle the national debt, like, talk about drops in a bucket. Like, it's just such a tiny fraction, like, of what it would actually raise. But, I was going to say that you could almost draw an analogy of the same way that, people get fired up on gun control, how you just try to, like, just little pieces here and there with how they go after guns. It's the same thing with public lands. They're not going to just like take all the guns away. They're not going to just take all the public lands away. It's just like every little inroad is how they're going to try to attack this and chisel away at it. It's never going to be just one fell swoop of everything. So that's why it's like I feel like justified in sounding the alarm, especially with it's one thing when it's like little chunks, 10 acres here and there in Vegas every couple of years or whatever, but when they're talking about 500,000 acres, that is a significant portion of land.
And I've asked around yesterday, well, why don't we have details? Why are they saying we're going to do this, but no one will lay out the details? Well, the details, some of these folks have went to agencies and went to staffs and said, figure out where are the obstacles in trying to accomplish this? And there's multiple spots where the statement was 500,000 acres.
Were you saying it's 500,000 of Forest Service, or was that collectively?
They asked Department of Ag, from what I understand, talking to some of the congressional folks and some of the lobbyists, the ask was made of the Forest Service. Now, whether or not they probably could have said 5,000, because you'd encounter the same hurdles if you asked for 5,000 as if you asked for 500,000. But nobody really knows the answer to some of the questions we're asking, Marcus. The strategy has been hold it, and then just throw it out there with a big steaming pile of crap and let everyone have to deal with it within a day or two. Gotcha. So that's why I kind of, last fall, you and I did a piece about all this campaign rhetoric around during the election cycle. A lot of the people are using, affordable housing, public lands are, we got these wastelands. And when we brought that up, a lot of people discounted it as, you guys worry about nothing, that. So when I heard these rumors a couple weeks ago, I'm like, well, there's so much happening here, you run the risk of crying wolf and people just discounting you. So that's why I didn't really bring it up and didn't make a deal out of it. Now I'm kind of wishing I would have when I first heard of it a couple weeks ago. And there's a risk right now of us talking about it and making it an issue. There was a lot of chatter yesterday on this, and I don't know if they're now going to retreat and say, all right, let's wait till the next reconciliation process comes. Or if they're going to use the chaos right now we're running on a continuing resolution which is to keep the government open. We keep doing that. Those are opportunities for them to do this stuff. So I hope that us talking about this today is all for naught. I hope that the folks say, whew, man, didn't expect that one. This is strategic. This isn't just somebody getting up one morning over breakfast and say, I think I'm going to do this today. This has been in the works for a long time. They have been building up their support on their side. And this whole notion of, lowered cost of housing. If you looked at the article we focused on a couple weeks ago when we talked about this, there are Democratic senators who are like, anything to lower the cost of housing in my state. So even though the effort right now is led by a group of Republicans, there's a lot of support for this. And I think that's why, as public land people, we have to be paying attention. It's coming. To what degree, what size, what scope, who knows? Hopefully we'll find out the details in the next couple weeks. But that article was interesting. There were some people who were very excited about being quoted of being in favor of it.
Right.
And fortunately, where we live, we're lucky that the two of our delegation who were quoted kind of drew a line in the sand and said, no, ain't happening. Yeah. And so when I did meet with both of them and their staffs yesterday, I asked what would be some reasonable exceptions for this. And they came up with some things. Gardner, Montana, the gateway to Yellowstone Park, it does have, the Park Service is having a struggle with employee housing. So their comment was, if there was 5 acres that we're going to carve out and we're going to do a 50 or 99-year lease to somebody or something to build Park Service employee housing in Gardner or West Yellowstone, maybe that would be an exception. They didn't even say they would do that. Yeah. They just said those would be things that you'd have to consider, but we're talking 5-10 acre pieces, not
But in that same example, Gardner is in the heart of just a migration corridor and winter range. I mean, you got thousands of elk passing through there every winter, and I don't know. I mean, like every little chunk makes an impact. Like every little, I mean, that they're literally wintering in town and then right on the surrounding areas. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out, because that's what I've been trying to envision, like how you identify the Forest Service land. Because to me, it's a lot easier to sell, right? When you look at a map of Las Vegas and you see that there are 20-acre chunks of BLM that are completely surrounded by houses, it's like, okay, like that you can make an argument for. Like, yeah, ideally, like, I'm going to argue to, like, let's trade it. Let's get something better in return rather than just sell it. Because what do I get, as a public landowner, public hunter, what do I get out of you just selling it? But I'd like to, it'd be nice to see it being traded for something eventually. But for the Forest Service, it just seems like there's not nearly, I don't know, just like looking at a map and you tell me go dispose of your least favorite Forest Service lands. I'm like, man, I am going to have a real hard time picking out what I would be willing to dispose of. Where BLM, it's like, okay, if I had to get rid of it, this is it. But man, with Forest Service, that's a tough sell in my mind. It's really, and like, because even around like, right on, like we were talking about the ski resort example, if they're trying to build employee housing right around ski resorts too, also some of the fantastic wildlife habitat right on the boundary of ski resorts. And so it's just like, I don't love it. I don't love any of those options. So it's just, I don't know. I'm curious to see what happens. It'll be really interesting.
Yeah, the things that you point out are so many of the questions that were being asked yesterday will be asked today and tomorrow. Well, how can we find out more details on this? And the details are lacking. Like I said at the beginning, what's the criteria to make the list? How big is the list? Is there, what are the considerations going to be? Wildlife, migration corridors, access. The risk is, what's that?
I was just going to say too, one of the real disappointing things, I wish I could recall who it was and what article it was, but I remember somebody involved in all this was quoted about federal lands in general, and it was obvious that they didn't know. They had no idea of any of the stories of federal lands. They have no idea about like the public hunting, public recreation. It was like, they're like, most of the federal lands are just like unused like military stuff. It was something to that effect. And it's just like the amount of stories that like we've surrounded our lives in of just like using and recreating and hunting on public lands, like they didn't even have even the slightest knowledge of that, which was just, it's sad. And that's like the part where it's like, we need to get better at telling some of these stories to some extent. Like we have some amazing public lands that everyone that lives here can go use. And so the fact that there's a lot of people involved with this who are unaware of that story, unaware of that, they literally think that they're unused, wasted lands. That's all they are in their mind. And so that's a tough one. That's a tough one to realize.
It is, and if you listen to the campaign rhetoric from last summer, that's where that article you're talking about was in the Wall Street Journal, where J.D. Vance, vice president, just flat out said, these are a bunch of wastelands other than our military bases. These should be used to lower the cost of housing. I mean, it was a big article in the Wall Street Journal. And so that's become the adopted narrative. It's our job to let people know that that narrative is incorrect. And that's why you and I are having this discussion this morning. That's why I'm back here. That's why a bunch of other people are back here. We have to be vigilant and know that things are going to happen quickly. And if there's a call to action or a request I would make, and you can put this on the screen when you edit it, it's that people call the Capitol switchboard. They'll tell you who your senators are or who your representative is. or hopefully you already know that, and you just say, I'm opposed to adding any public land sale to the budget reconciliation process. That, if they're, the people who are ideologically into this, they're probably not going to be that impacted by it. But there's a lot of people who they have no life experience to be connected to public lands the way us and our audience are. But they could be convinced of that. And so for me, I'd like to just see as many people call right now and get ahead of that to whatever degree it can be. And if enough pressure is applied and this kind of just crawls back in a hole and doesn't become part of that process, people might say, oh, you guys made a big deal about nothing. Good. I'm glad it became nothing.
Right.
Because
yeah, exactly.
I can tell you yesterday, being up on Capitol Hill all day, I've never, of all my times back here, I've never seen a day where there was that much chatter, concern, and just flurry of activity around public lands.
Well, hopefully it's for the best but thanks for doing it. Thanks for being out there.
Oh yeah, and there are other people out here. I would say there were when that social hour last night, there were probably a dozen people there that I recognized from other, and they came from the hunting community. And then to see timber producers there, to see mill owners there, private land timber companies there, it's like, it's a pretty good group of, a diverse cross section. And every one of them have a different ability to touch a different person or in a different angle. And so I think the message everybody had was, we want better managed public lands, and we want access to our public lands, and we don't want less of them. And so,
Yeah. Well,
that's, anyhow, sorry to be out of the office this week, Marcus, and we had to do this remotely.
This is great. Yeah, thanks for being there, and thanks for taking the time to do this. So we'll get this video out there.
Yeah, I get 2 more days, so if I show up in the office Monday morning looking like I've been flattened by a truck, a week in D.C. will do that to you. But today's a good day, though. Today I get to meet with a lot of what we'd call friendlies, people who are in the right position on this. They also have some inside stuff to tell you because they sit on committees. Their staffers sit on the staff committee staffs. So those are places where you can get a lot of good information also. And I really hope this disappears. And it's not like everybody can fly back to DC and do this. And I'm happy that we can do it. But one thing most everybody can do is get a hold of their congressional people and just say, you know what, don't even go there. We do not want it. If we're going to talk about disposal of public land, it needs to be out here in the full daylight, not in some political shortcut, using procedure as a way to avoid having to have an honest discussion about this. Because they know it would never pass the U.S. Senate with the 60 votes required. It wouldn't pass the House as close as the House is right now. It's like a 4 or 5 seat majority one way or the other. It wouldn't pass the House. So they don't want it to see the light of day. So they use these mechanisms and these little procedural things as their way to do it.
Well, thanks for educating us on the matter, and keep fighting the good fight.
Better get my tie and my suit on here and take my hat off and get ready to go up to get my Uber and head on up to the buildings. It's what's got to be done, Marcus, and I appreciate that, those other groups of people I ran into yesterday and the groups who coordinate this. really thankful for all the work. There's a lot of people. That, to me, that's what's exciting, is you go to a social hour and there's 200 people there that all were brought in kind of on the same issues, but like some were approaching it about different topics on public land. But someone, I don't even know who it was, they said, hey, we're going to have a public land social hour. And so a bunch of us got the invite, and like, all right, I know there's 200 in the scope of this country isn't a lot, but it shows that there are a lot of people who are as committed, invested in this as I am, and as we are, and as hunters are. And so that gets you a little bit more optimistic.
Yeah. Well, we're going to be watching it and, see what happens. Hopefully, like you said, this is all for naught, and it won't happen, but it's not an idea that's going away anytime soon. Like you said, they've been trying this since the 80s, so it's still going to happen, but hopefully this time it doesn't.
Yeah, let's hope so. I'll see you on Monday.
Sounds good. See you, Randy. All right, then, let's call the Capitol switchboard. In Montana, my senators are Steve Daines and Tim Sheehy, so let's see how this works. I just Googled Capitol switchboard. Gonna call this.
You've reached the United States Capitol switchboard. Please say the name of the senator or representative that you are trying to reach, or say, I'm not sure.
Tim Sheehy.
Connecting you to the office of Senator Tim Sheehy. Dialing. Thank you for calling the Washington, D.C. office of Senator Sheehy. Currently, all of our staff are assisting other constituents, or you have reached us after hours. Please leave your message. Thank you.
Record your message at the tone. When you are finished, hang up or press pound for more options.
Hi, this is Marcus Hockett from Bozeman, Montana. I was just calling to give some comments on recent news that was talking about the budget reconciliation process and how there is word of selling federal land or disposing of, transferring federal land. We're kind of unsure at this point, but because it's being brought up in the budget reconciliation, it sounds like in the next couple weeks this could be an issue. And I was happy to see that Steve Daines, my other senator here in Montana, was against this. And I was hoping that Tim Sheehy would also be against this. I would really like to see our federal lands stay in public hands as a hunter and recreational user in Montana. And I haven't heard anything from Tim Sheehy, a public stance, where I have from Steve Daines and from Ryan Zinke. So hopefully you will also be on board with voting against this. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. If you want to call me back, my phone number is 406. Thank you.